Space Rogue is with us to discuss his book, How Hackers Known as Loft Changed the World, which comes out today. Then Pablo Zurro is with us from Fortra's Core Security to talk about pen testing and red teaming. Finally, Dr. Inka Karppinen from CybSafe joins us to talk BS, behavioral science, that is. That's right, 3 interviews today on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy Do a Grouch a Favor Day. This is episode 306, recorded on Thursday, February 16th, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Master of Marketing, the Mayor of Mayhem, the Professor of Purdue Models, Tyler Shields. How are you, Tyler? You're on mute, it seems.
Well, great. I laughed and said I hadn't heard that last one, the professor of whatever the hell you said.
Purdue Models.
Purdue Models. Oh, my goodness. There's some real insanity. You're going deep in the well on that one.
Hey, we're about to talk about the 90s, so I figured, might as well start here with the intros.
I do think we will eventually hit a lot of flashback-style stuff in this particular interview, and I'm so excited for this interview, you have no idea.
Me too. Also joining us is the Czar of Zero Trust, the Captain of Content, Katie Tytler. How are you, Katie?
I'm well. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday to you. And you do a grouch a favor every day. You own a cat.
I do. He's taking a bath right now. My dog's snoring in the corner. It's just a veritable zoo over here.
Also joining us is the Baron of Bloodhound, the Pirate King of PowerShell, Sean Metcalf. How are you, Sean?
Doing good, Adrian. Looking forward to getting into spring so that we can get away from this winter thing that apparently the rodent up north in Pennsylvania decided that was going to continue for several more weeks.
Yeah, everybody's getting different stuff. We've got spring. I took some Dayquil today, so I wouldn't be all stuffy for the podcast, but we're in full high wind tree pollen season right now. We're in our first spring.
Yeah, that's not enjoyable at all.
It is not. All right, few announcements here. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover in one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and we'll reach out to you once reviewed. I am a little behind on my reviews for once. I promise I will get to those. I've actually already promised I'd get to them later today to Renee. So I'll get there, Renee. Also, while we don't have a news segment today, I wanted to take a moment to tell you about the Security Funded newsletter. In the past, when putting together the news segment, I'd set aside 3 or 4 hours to gather interesting stories, funding events, and acquisitions for us to discuss, from newsletters, custom Google searches I had, all these different things. And then I discovered Mike Prevet's Security Funded newsletter and has cut my prep time down to less than an hour. So I felt kind of obligated to give him a little ad here because he saved me so much time every week. Security Funded breaks down cybersecurity funding news by product category from a CISO's point of view. If you have any interest in security startups or emerging trends in the security market, you should sign up for the Security Funded newsletter at returnonsecurity.com. All right, with that, we're talking to Space Rogue today about his memoirs, How the Hackers Known as Loft Changed the World, which is available right now. You can go to securityweekly.com/Space Rogue to get some links to where you can buy both the digital and the physical version of that book. And Space is probably best known as a member of Loft Heavy Industries, but he also created the popular websites Whacked Mac Archives and Cybersquirrel 1. He also produced the weekly Spider Labs radio podcast, which I used to listen to every episode of, and the weekly news video program, the Hacker News Network, which was a little early for me. I guess I think I missed the original version of those, and they came back, and I watched some of those. But he currently works as the Global Policy and Special Initiatives Lead for IBM's X-Force. Welcome, Space.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so, I guess the natural first question is, who and what drove you to write this book? Who was there anybody cracking the whip behind you here, or was this something that you had been attempting over the years and just pushing yourself to eventually do? How did this come about?
The book, there's been attempts to write the book. Several people have tried to write the Loft story, as it were, for a long time. And we've had some well-named authors come to us and say, hey, I want to write the Loft book. And we're like, okay. And they start doing the interviews and trying to do the research and realize that it's a huge, huge story and it's a big undertaking. And so those efforts never really panned out. And I guess maybe 5 years ago, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to write what I know and what I remember and try to put that down. And I realized that's a huge, huge undertaking. But somehow, at some point, August or so of 2019, I realized, I'm just going to start writing. And I did. And I made an outline. I filled in the outline. And before I know it, I had 70, 80,000 words. And then I polished it up a little bit. And I had a book. And kind of how it happened.
And then that was it. You were done. It was published, right?
No, the publishing story is a whole nother mess. First I tried to get go through the traditional route and get an agent, which means you send out query letters and they read your letter. And if they like your book or your idea, they say, hey, I'll represent you. And then they try to sell you to a publisher. And I had 3 or 4 agents come to me and say, hey, this is a great story. I really like it. I really want to get behind this project, but I don't think it works as a memoir. In fact, I think it would be better if we rewrote it and did the full nonfiction treatment and got some interviews done and did the footnotes and all that other stuff. And I'm like, I've written this as a memoir. It's kind of my story. If we try to change it, I don't really have the time and bandwidth to do all that. So after 3 or 4 episodes like that, I was like, I'm just gonna do it myself. And so I hired a developmental editor, hired a copy editor. Got some beta readers, got somebody to design the book, put this all together and published it. And so now it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Apple Books and anywhere else that your local corner bookstore will be able to order it as well. So
awesome. And I guess my next question is just kind of the size and the shape of the book and the story. What made it into the book? What's the general where does it begin? Where does it end? And what I imagine when putting something like this together, even with the size of a book, you still have to make some choices as to what to include and what not to include in the book. So what made it in? What didn't make it in? And what's
as for the size, it's about 6 inches by 9 inches. Standard.
It's a rectangle. It's a rectangle shape.
It's a rectangle. It's 361 pages, I think. 349 in the hardcover version. As for what's in the book, it is a memoir. So it starts out at the beginning, where I grew up in Maine and what technology I had available to me and how I sort of made the journey from rural backwoods dirt farming Maine to cybersecurity and how that evolved and the path that I took to get there. Detoured in the U.S. Army, went to Boston University for school, had to leave BU because I ran out of money really quick because it's an expensive school. But because of that, I was able to fall in with a bunch of folks who were calling bulletin board systems at the time, the old BBSs on dial-up phone networks. And we created the Loft, where I was asked to join the Loft. And the Loft started looking at security vulnerabilities and posting those things on our website. One of probably the very first organizations to publicly release information like that, and sort of started the whole vulnerability disclosure debate and how we do that and what we're going to call it and how much notice do we give companies and the things that we still debate today. From there, Loft went on to, for those that don't know the story, went on to testify in the U.S. Congress in 1998. I created the Hacker News Network. We got some venture capital from and formed a company or got bought by a company called At Stake. And so all of those things are in the book and are detailed to the best of my recollection as to what happened and how they impacted and what was impacted. Now, things I left out of the book, I mean, like it's 348 pages, and I couldn't put everything in there. So there are some stories that got left out. And like I said, when I was writing the book, I had an outline, and I just kind of went through and filled out the outline. And so I cut some things that I didn't think were relevant, and I thought up more things that I remembered, and I was like, oh, I got to put this in there. So it was just kind of a process that I went through as I was writing to decide what was important and what was relevant to the story and what wasn't.
One last question before I let everybody kind of, I know there's lots of pressing questions from everybody here that read the book. But do you anticipate any, I don't want to say drama and blowback, but, I'm sure when you point out, you say, I hope other people also write up their recollections. I don't know if I'm reading into that too much when I think people might disagree with your version of how things happen.
I have had one comment so far from one of the early readers that they didn't like the book too much, or at least one section of it. But for the most part, the feedback has been fairly positive. As far as my point in the epilogue of the book that I hope that others also write their story of the Loft, is because I think it was a very impactful organization one way or the other. One of the very first websites on the internet, one of the first 10,000 websites. There were a lot of people that not only looked and interacted with our website, but also interacted with At Stake or read our advisories or worked at Stake and have gone on. I think there's a paragraph at the end where I list a bunch of very well-known people who were heavily influenced by Loft. So I think that I only have one viewpoint and what I saw and what I remember from those events. And I would hopefully hope that other people would also write their viewpoints and what they remember about the Loft and their interaction with it, so that maybe together we can try to put together an actual truth of what the Loft was and what it meant to the industry and the internet as a whole. Because at this point, I think before I started to see, and one of the reasons I put the book together was that it was some mythology starting to be created around the Loft, and stories that were getting longer and more grandiose with the retelling. And that's great and that's fun, but it's not really accurate and historical and how I remembered things. And so I wanted to get those memories down on record so that I could refer to them and other people could refer to them as well, and look and say, well, Space Rogue said it happened this way. And then hopefully somebody else will write theirs down and say, well, somebody else says it happened this way. And then maybe between the different versions, we can figure out what exactly really happened.
So Space, I have a history alongside you. I certainly don't claim to be anywhere near part of the Loft. I was a 2001 addition to the At Stake team and had the opportunity to meet you a few times. But thinking back, I read the book. I have like 20 pages left to go, so I'm pretty much cover to cover at this point. And your experiences mirror mine, and probably mirror a large number of people our age, right? Experience-wise, like coming up through the BBS scene, moving into hardware scavenging, trying to pull things together. I had racks in my apartment, racks of old hardware in my apartment in Silicon Valley. It's very much a story of kind of building it from zero and building the cybersecurity community and universe really from zero, from a non-existent state. What I've always wondered, because I don't know how many folks really know this, but the Loft was a massive influence on me personally, a massive influence. Because I remember from when I moved out Silicon Valley at 22 years old, seeing the stuff that the Loft was putting out, having heard of them for a handful of years before I moved out there at 22 years old, and then being there, when BO2K was launched, being at DEF CON 6 and seeing some of the speakers and getting to meet some of the folks, massive impact on me. But what I've always wondered about the history, and when I was reading the book, one of the things I wondered, at what point did the Loft become, let's call it, sentient on its impact on the world? And so, in the steps of the book, right, you kind of go through your experience, how you grew, how you joined the Loft, how it grew, how it testified in front of the Senate, how it, turned into a private company, and et cetera, et cetera. At what point were you able to sit with the team at the Loft and go, hey, Weld, hey, folks on the team, this is important? Like, at what point did that become a reality for you?
I don't know if I could say when the group realized that. I mean, for me, there's 2 or 3 poignant moments. One of which I describe in the book was when I'm on stage at Beyond Hope, I think it was, which is the second Hope, and I realized that like people already knew me in the crowd, like, and would come up and say hi. And I'm like, oh, I don't know who you are, and you're saying hello to me, and like, how does that happen? Like, that's kind of mind-boggling. And then we're on stage and we're being streamed live to Europe over an ISDN line, and and this is in 1996 or 1997, and it's like it was just that was a big moment for me. Like, okay, Loft is kind of a little bit more than what I thought it was. And then there was the Senate testimony, which of course was pretty big, and you get mentioned on Conan O'Brien as a punchline. So, and those were, but I don't know if we all sat down as a group and said, okay, this Loft thing is kind of bigger than we thought it was, or is becoming more impactful than we thought it was, or is really making a huge difference. It was kind of because it was a slow evolution over 7, 8, 9 years, and it just sort of kind of grew on itself and started to snowball and move along, and we just kind of moved along with it. And so I don't know if there was any light bulb moment for the group. I had a couple of small ones individually, but I don't. As the group, I don't know. We'd have to get everybody together in a room and decide that.
Yeah, I mean, as a consciousness, it's kind of tough to know, right? And you kind of can't know in the moment, right? And in some ways, people would ask me the same thing, like, "Oh, you're part of ETSTake, like that was a thing, right? That does have its own gravitas. Certainly not as much, I don't think, as the Loft, as far as a broader impact." But it still held gravitas for a while. Sadly, as we get older, those things tend to fade away. But you never know it in the moment. It's very hard to kind of recognize that this is having a massive impact. Because I think if we could notice it, we may not make the same risky decisions, right? And looking back at some of the decisions you guys made as a group, as a team, you made plenty of risky decisions along the era of building the Loft and transforming it into ETSTake and eventually moving on from it. What would you say the biggest moments of fear, of doubt, of, hey, is this a smart thing for us to be doing? What were the 1 or 2 biggest moments of fear you had, either as an individual or as a team collectively, as you can remember?
So I talk about there's one event that I know that was controversial. A couple events that we did have some legal trouble, which I briefly cover in the book. There wasn't anything major when you look back on it and see, oh, well, so and so is trying to sue us. Like, yeah, whatever. At the time, it was huge, because we couldn't afford lawyers. We didn't want to go to court. We didn't know what was going on. We're like, we'll just get rid of this, right? So those were a couple of moments where we're like, yeah, this is a big issue. There was another issue I talk about during my Hacker News Network when it was a website before it was video, and there was the Legion of Underground, for those who remember this story back in 1999, who ended up declaring cyber war on Iran. And I think it came out of Chaos, the Chaos Computer Group in Computer Club in Europe. They're like, well, this is not good. We can't have groups going around declaring cyber war because that's just bad. So we're going to come out and say that we're against this. And they basically created a coalition of hacker groups around the world to join them and signing on to this document saying that this is bad. And Loft really hadn't gotten into a lot of policy stuff like that and hadn't really put ourselves out there at that point. And it was kind of a big discussion inside the Loft as to whether or not we were going to sign our name to this document. And I thought it was like a done deal. Like, of course we're going to sign our name to this. This is absolutely right up our alley. We're only going to do this. But when I put this to everybody else in the group, there was a lot of hesitation about getting involved in that sort of thing. And so thankfully, eventually, we were able to come to an agreement to add our name to it, because I thought that if we didn't add our name to it, that it would have looked really bad for us not to be a part of it. And I still think that. So I'm very glad that we ended up signing that document and denouncing the cyber war of 1999 of Legion of Underground against Iran and Iraq. But, if you look at that now, it seems very naive to think that that had any impact or difference at all when you have major nations launching cyber wars against each other, known and unknown, right? The recent revelations coming out of Israel today. But that was a big influence, I think, or a big impact that we had at the Loft, where I was like, this is a make or break deal. This is a risk that we're taking, but this is, I think, something that we have to do. So, yeah.
Hey, Space. Thanks so much for being on here. I really appreciate getting the opportunity to talk to you, and certainly hearing the history from someone who was there. Had some fun conversations at around Black Hat and DEF CON this past summer, and Dill Dog was there, and had some good chat with him, and have kind of bounced around the community and been around in peripheral with folks from Loft over the years. But I remember using LoftCrack back in the day and working with Windows NT in order to use it to identify weak passwords. There have been many who have identified issues with Microsoft security and attempted to push to make things better. And certainly you wrote in the book, which I read and enjoyed immensely, about how LoftCrack was really meant to add to the voices of saying to Microsoft, hey, this is a problem, it needs to be fixed. I've focused my career on the Microsoft side of things, and certainly security has been not great in that area and the defaults. You mentioned Windows Snyder and Katie Masuris in your book, and they've done a lot to help improve community involvement around security researchers and how companies interact with them. How do you feel that companies are doing with that interaction with security researchers today? Has it gotten better or good enough? What are some areas that still need some improvement?
It's interesting because I forget who it was that said it, but the future is here, but it's not evenly distributed. And we still see that with security reactions from companies, large companies, as to whether or not they're helping or hindering security practices. And I think for the most part, of course, if you look at Microsoft today versus it was 1999 or 98, totally different company, right? And most companies are different, but there's still a lot of companies that look at security as an impediment to business and don't want to know about their vulnerabilities and don't want you to tell them about their vulnerabilities. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have companies who are doing bug bounties and rewarding researchers for finding issues. So on the one hand, we've come a long way. Like bug bounties were never a thing back in the 90s. But at the same time, we still have a large number of companies who aren't responding in that way and are not offering that opportunity to folks.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. Related to that, one of the things that I really enjoyed in the book is the definition of a hacker. So for me, hackers have always been curious, interested in how things work, want to really understand the system from kind of the inside out. A key point that I read in the book was effectively do no harm. Like, go ahead and look at things, be curious, but really don't cause any damage. And there's been a variety of approaches to what hackers are over time. Certainly a whole movie about it where apparently hackers skate around and spray paint their keyboards. But how do you see the evolution of both the term and the hacker community itself today versus how it was you coming up, certainly with hacker spaces like Loft?
That's a good point. The do no harm, look around but don't cause any damage. That was kind of an ethos that was there for me anyway. At the point when I was looking around in systems, and I think in some cases that ethos has sort of disappeared. Partly because technologically we don't need to do that anymore. If you wanted to learn various operating systems or large systems, multi-user systems, you kind of had to do that out of necessity. Like there was no other option. Today, you can run, through emulation or virtualization or whatever. You can run those large operating systems on a small desktop machine, a Raspberry Pi, for example, or something. So that the opportunities are much greater today to gain that knowledge by yourself. Whereas in the early days when I was coming up, that opportunity didn't exist. So you sort of had to make your own opportunities, as it were. But the technology sort of has hopefully caught up and enabled people to sort of learn a lot more on their own without having to violate other systems or compromise them in any way. So it sort of makes it easier for people who are tinkering and trying to learn. And at least it definitely makes it safer. Keep yourself out of jail, as it were. So, time marches forward and we keep going forward and hopefully things will get even better.
Absolutely. And from my perspective, I mean, things were a lot more amorphous back there. It wasn't as clear as what system you were on and who or where you were interacting, who you might be interacting with. I remember when I got my first modem in the 90s, connecting into a system, dialing in, and then going from there and telnetting into another system where I could create an account for myself on the system and then just kind of poke around and then connect to another system and look somewhere else. So all this kind of thought of looking at things to see what's there, I think kind of there's this pivot into the cloud. I feel like we're kind of in a similar type situation there, which is another question I have for in a few minutes. But one of the themes in the book that was clear to me while reading it was your interest in the level of tinkering, from making a flashlight, in your youth, to figuring out how to repair Macs at CompUSA, to building and rebuilding several computer types, including Macs. And to me, that's kind of the essence of hacking. What other personality traits or interests do you think are important for people who are working to help improve computer security or even getting into the field?
I mean, you mentioned two of the biggest ones, I guess, tinkering and curiosity. What does this do? Oh, let me push the button and find out. What happens if I type this command? What happens if I do that? Let's just check it and see. That kind of goes along with having your own systems to do these sorts of things on, so that if you cause damage or something crashes or there's some service is borked or whatever, you can just turn it off, turn it back on again. And so we can do that today. It was difficult to do that before. You mentioned the tinkering. I don't know if you can see behind me, I have my workbench right back here with my solder and iron, my little tinkering projects that I'm tinkering on, which these days mostly involves repairing my kids' toys. But still, it's fun. I break out the old soldering iron and trying to or redo some firmware or something. And so I still keep my hands in stuff now and still try to tinker and keep that curiosity edge sharp. But those are some of the key traits I think that are needed. And so I deal with our interns at IBM a lot, and most of them are still in college and they're taking standard security classes, and some of them come in with a very strong curiosity, desire to tinker with stuff, and some of them don't, but they're very good at the classes that they have. And so part of the thing that we try to do during our internship is sort of teach them how to be curious and realize and let them know that, if you just try something and it breaks, it's not a big deal. That's how you're going to learn. So please try to break this. And so it's very interesting to see them progress through the summer, through the internship, and watch them become curiouser and curiouser over the summer till we basically graduate them at the end of the year and send them back to school. So hopefully to be better security professionals than when they arrived with us.
Yeah, and so I mentioned the cloud a little while ago and how, looking at the cloud today, kind of comparing it to the early days of the internet where you would modem into something, then you would then telnet somewhere else. And whereas before we were using telnet apps, now we're using a web browser, and pretty much everything is done from the web browser. So I kind of see the evolution of computers and computing as effectively waves from mainframes to modems and BBSs, and then we get the internet with the web layered on top of that. And the next wave that we see after that, or as I see it, are companies connecting to the internet and the challenges with that. So now we've invited attackers effectively into our environment because firewalls aren't doing it, controlling that. And then leveraging the internet as part of the business and incorporating that. We're likely in the cloud wave now, with the next one very possibly probably being AI. How do you see this evolution? Where do you see things going?
I kind of looked at the evolution to cloud as return to client server, right? Return to the mainframe, where you have multiple users using the same resources. Is one way to look at it. I don't know if the next wave is AI or not. I haven't really seen anything yet that I would call intelligent, artificial or otherwise, in that area. There's a couple of years ago, everybody thought the next wave was going to be blockchain. Well, that kind of imploded. I don't know if machine learning, which is probably a better accurate description of what we're seeing today than artificial intelligence. I don't know if that's the next wave or not, but it's definitely an exciting wave. Definitely some stuff that's good to tinker with. We see a lot of people tinkering with the current clients that are available publicly at the moment. And I have to wonder, when I see the output of some of these clients, I'm like, well, if that's what they're making public, what do they have behind the curtain that's not public? Like, how much more advanced are they? And that's something that I always think about, like, well, okay, this is what's out today that I can access. What kind of stuff is out there that they're accessing on the workbench, and what are they thinking about for the next thing? And so, technology marches forward. It's very exciting, and I don't know what the next wave is going to be. Maybe it is going to be whatever this AI thing is that they're calling AI. Maybe it'll be something else. The quantum computing and whatnot. It's hard to know, but I'm looking forward to it.
So I'm glad that you talked a little bit about your background and it set the stage. And as Sean alluded to, you mentioned in the very beginning of the book that tinkering and curiosity are huge parts of becoming a hacker. But you also alluded to this hierarchy or this almost class system that existed back then. And I think there's still a little bit of that. Personally, I'm not very technical. And I still get that sense in certain groups, certainly not all of them. There are amazing people in security as well, but there are certain people in security who have this idea of an elite group. But when we're talking about cybersecurity now versus 20, 30 years ago, the industry is completely different. So you said, hey, I'm sorry for all I did back then, but what is your opinion now of how things work? How should things work? What kinds of people should be getting into security? How can we encourage this as a growing field? Because it is. It's very, very different and very, very in demand now.
So I think, back in the day, as it were, there was a lot of gatekeeping and a lot of people trying to keep other people out and not sharing as widely as they could have, to put it lightly. And today, you say things have changed a lot in the 20, 30 years, and they have changed, but we have the same people in the industry that we had then. And some of those issues are still there. Some of that gatekeeping is still there. So how do we change that? How do we move forward and make things more accessible to everyone? And I think by looking for underrepresented groups and actively attempting to encourage them to get involved, we will widen our pool of talent and knowledge that we have available to us. And that can only help everybody, right? At IBM, we take active steps to recruit widely and not be that gatekeeper and give other folks a chance that may not otherwise have a chance. And that's something that I think everyone sort of needs to actively be involved in, and realizing that just because that's how it was always done does not mean that's the way it always has to be. And that we can make steps to get more broader experiences, more broader voices, get those types of people involved and encourage them to continue on and overcome the naysayers and the people that are trying to hold them back.
So how would you say, technology, being technical is obviously an important part of this field that will never go away, but where are the areas that people should push on when they are hiring? Because not everybody is going to be technical. It's not always needed. And in some roles, it might be better to not be. But for those people who want to grow their career and also acquire some of those technical skills, what do you think are the good resources? Because back then, as you said, tinkering on your own, that was kind of it. Now we have college and graduate level degrees in it. Where's the happy medium? Maybe someone who can't go to school, who doesn't have that opportunity, or just on their own trying to learn. What advice do you have for them?
The first part of your question, let me talk a little bit about IBM and the hiring that we do there. I run an internship program through IBM's X-Force, and we get a large number of applicants every year. And because it's a federally recognized internship program, we have certain requirements as to who can apply and what their status is. But we often get candidates who are not as technical as other candidates, right? And that makes sense. And so we try not to exclude folks who may not have the same resources available at whatever school they choose to be at, because some other school happens to have a better computing program. So when we do our interviews and we ask people questions, we design the questions in such a way that those who have the technical skills can shine in the technical aspects. But for those that don't have the technical skills, they can still shine in the interview and answer the question appropriately by basically the question is designed to explore how a person thinks as opposed to what they know, right? So, if you can tell me, what TCP port 22 is, great. If you can't, that's okay too. And you can tell me instead how you would figure something out. So now, how does somebody who doesn't have access to resources to be technical get technical? The internet is there. If you have access to the internet, you really have access to everything you need to be. And there's another flip side to your question, and I think is that, is there still an area today for the self-taught security professional? It's still a debate that sort of rages whether or not somebody needs to have a cybersecurity degree or whether or not they can sort of learn everything on their own. And I think there is still a space for that person who wants to go it on their own and learn it on their own. Is it going to be easier? Absolutely not. The easiest route is to try to get a college degree in your chosen field from a reputable school and do well in your grades. That's the easiest way. Now, you can go different ways. You can get certifications. You can just self-teach yourself, but it is going to be more difficult. So that's where it becomes incumbent upon those in the industry who are doing the hiring to try to recognize that those types of people exist who may not have a high-level security degree and instead have sort of been really working hard, possibly harder, to try to learn the same amount of stuff. And so we have to recognize that those people are out there and give them an opportunity and be able to hire them when we can.
Thank you.
So kind of building off that question, do you see a loft-shaped hole in the industry today? Obviously we've got community stuff, we've got local DEF CON groups, there's Discords all over the place. Certainly, I think there's a lot of collectives that are more tied together, and disparate, all over the place, than folks who are locally who go to like a. But we've got both. We've got people spread out over multiple time zones in countries that work together on stuff, and we've got folks who, effectively have like a maker space, and hang out in person a lot. But have we lost anything though? Do you see that kind of loft-shaped hole anywhere? Is the communities that we have now, less effective? Maybe not. A lot of it's driven after getting people a job in the industry, right? Whereas that wasn't necessarily the loft's goal, right? It was to figure things out. It was to find solutions to problems, to find the problems in the first place. Is there something that's been?
I think, there was no industry, right, when the loft was around trying to do this sort of thing. So there was no push for loft to try to get people into the industry because the industry did not exist. Is there a loft size hole today? I don't think there's a hole. I think that things are more distributed, more flatter, more wider. You listed off a whole bunch of different things that are going on with Discords and Slacks and you got B-sides events everywhere. So I think there's definitely opportunities available for folks. It's just not in a one-stop shop. Like you can't just go to the Loft website and down a bunch of files and learn a bunch of stuff. You kind of got to go around and poke where you're at. Also, there's a lot more stuff to learn, right? We've got 25 years of technology that didn't exist back in the Loft days. So there's a lot more stuff to learn. It's distributed around in a lot more places, which might make it a little bit more difficult for people to try to find all that stuff. But if you find your niche, find what interests you, then you can hopefully find your people and collaborate with them and build your community and move from there.
And then building on that, did the Loft back in the day do much collaboration with other groups, or were groups mostly siloed? Was it seen as competition, or were there any research projects where like you guys at the CDC or some other groups put your heads together and stuff?
There was not a lot of. It was not siloed as you would think, as what you're saying. It also wasn't really a very collaborative space. There was cross-pollination, right? Some of the Loft members were members of Cult of the Dead Cow, but there were also memberships in RDT, I think we had a woo-woo member. There may have been a root member or two. So there was a lot of cross-pollination. I don't remember specifically any collaborative efforts of various things other than the signatory of the letter denouncing the LOU cyber war. But other than that, I don't remember a lot of projects where one group would work together with another group. And that may have been a limitation of the technology at the time. I don't know. LOFT was a physical group where we had a physical space and we physically got together every week. A lot of other groups were virtual and only existed online. So that may have been a little bit of a difference there between the things. But and I worked with outside people individually. I had a lot of work that I did with attrition.org and Jericho and some other groups. And I'm sure other members of the Loft had their thing that they did and things that they worked on, which is, again, another reason why I'm hoping that other folks write their own books so that we can learn more of these stories. I know, and I'm going to go off on a tangent from your question here, after I think Tan read the book and Weld read the book and Kingpin read the book, and they get back to me like, I didn't know that happened. And they were there in the room with me, and they don't remember that happening. So I'm sure that they have similar stories that they remember or very events that were very poignant to them, and that I have no recollection or was not involved in at all. So I've kind of deviated from your question, but yeah.
No, it's good. Yeah, Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Space, as we bump up against the end of our time here on this conversation, I have one additional question. I feel like, because like I said, I've been in the same era as you. I feel like time is killing a lot of our learnings from back in the day. And now a lot of the, technology's documented, things like that. But, you and I came up the same way. We hacked for learning and knowledge. We built an industry. We built a discipline that didn't exist before we and many others, but we got into it. And, as time progresses, less and less people know the history of those that came before them. What can we do? You're writing a book, which is a great example of it, but what could we do besides writing an awesome book to ensure that the learnings of our era don't fade away with us? And I don't just mean the technical learnings, but the relationship learnings, the knowledge learnings, the things that you really do outline in the book.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, writing books is one way, and I think there's a certain permanence to a book and putting things down on actual physical paper as opposed to a blog post or something. And I would encourage more people who were around in that time frame or who had involvement in specific events to record their memories and thoughts down on in a book. But I know there are other efforts to try to preserve some of that legacy, if you will. Jack Daniel at one point was working on the Shoulders of InfoSec project. I don't know if he's passed that off onto someone else or not, but he was basically attempting to document the giants of our industry who came before us and the shoulders that we stood on to try to get to the point that we were at. So hopefully that effort is continuing. And hopefully, and I know there's a lot of data preservation going on. Jason Scott is one of the people that I know that are actively doing this and trying to save all the bits and bytes that are out there and before they get deleted and lost and gone forever. I mean, I have my own data hoard, which will hopefully get uploaded to the Internet Archive at some point, including this book, as sort of saving it for posterity, if you will. And I encourage others to try to save their data and find some way to get it out to the masses and share it so that it's available and that the history isn't lost. It was one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is because I kind of thought the history was kind of getting away from us and we were collectively forgetting it. Unfortunately, I only know a very small part of the overall history. And so that's what I wrote.
Yeah, no, and I thank you for that. Like, I think it's very, very important. It's one of the reasons why I reached out when I heard you were putting a book out. I was like, I gotta get Space on the show for sure. It's funny. One of the key things that everybody always throws back to is the Loft testimony, which we have a picture of. I think a group of you right before the Loft testimony.
Yep.
Is this picture ring a bell?
Yep, that was the morning of the testimony outside the Phoenix Hotel in Washington D.C. And we had I think the doorman took the picture, and we all had our suits on, which was, I think I mentioned this in the book, was kind of a bone of contention as to what we were going to wear. And I'm like, we're going to the U.S. Capitol, we're wearing damn suits. And so we all had to go to the Men's Warehouse and buy a suit because I don't think we all owned one. So yeah, that was a picture that was taken that morning on our way to the Capitol right before we testified.
Yeah, that's such a classic photo. I've seen it a million times. I've been privy to see it a handful of times. But I want to thank you for coming on the show. And it's funny that's what everybody always refers to as that moment in time when you testified in front of Congress. But there's so much more meat to this story that I definitely recommend everybody go out and buy this book. It really is a great read. I want to kick it back to Adrian to wrap up this episode. But Space, I want to personally thank you for coming on and getting into some of the meat of that history.
I love being on this show.
Adrian, over to you.
Yeah, no, this has been a lot of fun. If you could only see our back channel in our Slack, literally 1,000 questions hit the cutting room floor for this. So yeah, we'll have to have you back on again to chat. Like I'd love to just chat CompUSA because you had similar experience.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
CompUSA.
I love that job. Coincidentally, the only job where people yelled "Yo, Adrian" at me with free. Never an issue with any other job. Only CompUSA did that. But unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much, Space, for coming on and sharing your stories with us.
Thank you for having me. Books available today at all your major resellers.
Yeah, if we could throw up that book image. Again, you can go to securityweekly.com/Space Rogue, which will redirect to the page that Space has collecting all the different places you can buy both the ebook and the physical book. All right, stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk pen testing and red teaming with Pablo Zurro from Fortra's Core Security. managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Follow us on LinkedIn for updates across our organization, show highlights, and more. You can find us by searching for Security Weekly Productions. All right, this interview is sponsored by Fortra. Pablo Zurro joins us today to talk about the key elements of offensive security, pen testing, and red teaming. Pablo leads product management for Core Security's cyber threat prevention solutions. Welcome to the show, Pablo.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here again.
Yeah, and just as someone who came out of a product management role recently, I'm curious, which products at Core Security are you responsible for? Are you product manager, product strategy for?
Yeah, so right now I'm leading like all the offensive security tools that we have in the company, in the portfolio. So I'm working with Core Impact, which is a penetration testing product. It has been there for more than 20 years. Then I'm also leading the product management side together with Greg Darwin on Cobalt Strike. So I'm doing more like the long-term strategy. I'm working with marketing, and he's leading the development and all the community stuff that he's doing. He's the main contact for the product, and I'm working together with him. And then I'm also working in a brand new product of a company that we acquired like 6 months ago. It's called Outflank Security Tooling, and it comes from one of the top-notch red teams that there are in the world. So they are working on that, and it's called OST, like the short name, and it's like a toolkit to help with Cobalt Strike and with other C2 frameworks. So basically, it offers a lot of tools that will help you in all the phases of the red teaming specifically. And it's like outsourcing the development of your red team. So basically, a lot of red teams don't have enough time to implement their own tools and to make them stealth, and they don't have the knowledge. And those guys, what they are doing is to share with some really vetted red teams what they are doing. They are sharing their research and their tools, and basically they make them accessible to really good red teams to be able to use them and to save money on development. So it's like a great complement that and with that portfolio, it's like we cover the full spectrum or most of it on the offensive security side.
So if I were to describe them by what they do, would it be correct to say Core Impact exploits, Cobalt Strike, implants, outflank, lateral movement?
Actually, outflank it does a bit of everything. So they have like for Cobalt Strike is like the hammer, and outflank security tooling, it offers the full toolkit from the in phase. So there's like a tool to create payloads. It's called Payload Generator, and what it does is to work on the raw shell code that can be exported from Cobalt Strike, and it generates a stealthy payload or stealthier implant or more evasive implant. They have also an Office toolkit that generates, for example, XLLs that can be used for the first access to the target through phishing. And then they have some stuff for the middle phase, for the through phase. So there's like a stage 1 C2 inside the outflank toolkit, where it's like a mini Cobalt Strike. So we call it internally sometimes even baby beacons, because it's really they have a big focus on evasion. So they made a C2 framework that is pretty evasive with not as much features as Cobalt Strike, but to put the first foothold in the network, it's really useful. And then they are constantly releasing through the toolkit beacon object files, and other tools that with a big focus on evasiveness. So yeah, they are like adding a lot of value to what can be done with Cobalt Strike, offering a lot of tools that the red teams need to make Cobalt Strike really more powerful than it is by default.
Got it. That helps. So yeah, let's jump into the main conversation here. Starting with something that's I think everybody's definitions are a little bit different when talking about the differences between red teaming and pen testing. I actually did a series of talks on pen testing back in 2018, and as part of preparing for that, I did some research, did some surveys on what people think of when they hear the term red team. And I think the vast majority of respondents to that think of what back in the day we called a web app pen test. So they thought like application testing or API testing, that kind of thing. Whereas me, from my background, I think more, trying to get into a business holistically, like maybe through an application, maybe through infrastructure, but doing kind of a, social engineering, a mix of everything. So let's jump in. How do you define the differences, pen testing and red teaming, and the differences between the two?
So to me, pen testing is about coverage. So it's purely about coverage and not about being stealth. So the idea of pen testing to me is to identify all the exploitable paths to data or compromise. So using, discover the gaps in security, take advantage of exploits, of bugs, or misconfigurations to find like all the possible attack paths that you can find in a company. At the end, the EDRs or evasion shouldn't be the main focus of pen testing. If I'd approach a pen testing project, I would try to give up on stealth. So to me, it wouldn't be important in a penetration test. On the other hand, on red teaming, the main goal is to provide the customer a learning experience. So the first question that our red teamers ask when they go to the customer is, what do you want to learn? So do you want to learn how to react against a massive attack to reach that tries to reach the goal or to encrypt as much as they can as fast as possible? You want to learn how to face a stealth long-running attack to reach a more specific goal without being catched. So from there, you can set up the goals of the red teaming experience. I would even call it, and start the game. So at the end, to me, penetration testing, it's something more mechanic, where you go one step after the other, and red teaming is more like a mouse and the cat game. So even at the end, the goal of red teaming is to provide a learning experience. So the defenders, the blue team, needs to learn some lesson. So if the red teamers are so good or have such a big ego that their goal is to reach to the target as fast as they can, the blue team won't learn anything. So to me, it should be something that goes step by step and providing some outcomes to the team. So it's the path, the journey is like the important part of the red team. In the pen testing, I would say that the important part is the outcomes and the reports. I don't know if that helped.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's and I think a lot of it comes down to the conversation with the client, right? Like regardless of whether they say they want a pen test, you kind of have to have, I think, a deeper conversation there. At least from a consulting point of view versus, maybe an internal red team or pen testing team. They might have further different definitions of what they mean there.
Yeah.
But yeah, often.
And sometimes. Go. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was about to say that sometimes it's even difficult to have these talks to the customers because they are reluctant to trust you. So at the end, a red teamer should be a the trusted consultant, the customer should understand that you're on the good side. So you will act like a hacker. You will try to mimic the hacker tactics as good as you can, but you're not going to steal their money, or you're not going to steal data. So they need to kind of open themselves and let you help them learn something. So yeah, that's like really important, and it's I think you should have really long and deep talks to the customer to agree on the scope of the engagement, and define what are the outcomes, what are the lessons that you want to get after the test.
Thank you. So I have a question, Pablo, about the security services that you've been talking about, penetration testing and red teaming. What do you feel is currently missing from the approaches of pen testing and red teaming as it relates to customers?
So with pen testing, there are a lot of customers that instead of looking at the engagement as an opportunity to find all the gaps that they have, they think on it as a fight. So it's a fight against the pen testers. So instead of letting them go in and find all the misconfigurations, all the bugs, all the vulnerabilities that the network has, some of them they put the EDR in full blocking mode. So it makes the exercise completely useless, because the goal of the EDRs is to evict and stop testers, and not to learn anything from the engagement. So that's like a big gap or a big problem that penetration testing engagements have. And with red team, it's kind of the same thing, but on a different place. So in red teaming, sometimes the not very mature customers, they ask you to try to access from the outside, and there are techniques. It's possible to do a phishing, but sometimes it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, some customers are happy because it didn't work, and they say, okay, let's stop it because you're not good enough. You didn't manage to bypass my external security, so we can stop the test. And they don't feel they feel like they won, instead of feeling that they learned something. So there, if you manage to stop the red teamers at first, you don't learn anything. And the goal of the red team engagement is learning something. And we find this like lack of maturity in some customers, that they want to do a red team engagement to mark the compliance check, or just to be cool because they passed or they made a red team engagement, but they are not ready for it, or they are not willing to take advantage on it. So that's like the difficulty. And it's when I talk to our security consultants, it's something that they repeat a lot. So sometimes when the customers are really happy because they stop them, it's in many cases it's because they want it to be stopped. So if they wanted to reach the goal really fast, they would do it. But at the end, they want to provide some lessons, and they want they want the customer to learn something. So at the end, they let the customer catch them on purpose, just to check the processes that they are doing. And at the end, the customers, they understand that that's helpful for them, and that it's better if they treat the consultants as a trusted partner, instead of an enemy that wants to break your security. So that's like the most difficult part, to convince the customer to go through that process, and to be honest on it.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, certainly when performing an engagement, it's important to balance what the customer is looking for, what their goals are as part of that engagement. And it seems to me like there used to be a lot more outside-in approaches to red teaming, so to speak, where the red team would fish, get in, work through that. It seems like because of the amount of time and cost that is associated with that, including crafting really good phishing messages, get the right person to click on it, get that initial foothold, that there's been more of a hybrid approach that has been occurring now, where maybe the external approach and attack perspective and simulation is done in conjunction and as part of a broader assessment, which has an external part, an internal part, where maybe the red team starts on a system and then goes from there. Do you see this kind of hybrid approach or this methodology being a good solution to enable both the red team to show a lot of good value, as well as the customer to be able to reduce or keep their costs in line?
Yeah, actually, it's like that. So if you want to do an approach from the outside, you need to spend at least a couple of weeks trying to perform the fish and wait for somebody to click. And we have in our security consultancy teams, we have a trick to make it a bit more realistic, that assume breach approach. So what we ask when we go for when we avoid the external testing or the phishing attack, we try to make it as similar as possible as if the user clicked the link. So what we do is to ask for a laptop of an account that was from somebody who left the company, that we ask them to enable them, or we ask for a used laptop. And what we do is to phish ourselves. So we do the same phishing that others would do, but instead of waiting for somebody in the customer to click the link, what we do is to click the link ourselves in the laptop that we have in the network, in the customer network. So at the end, technically, it would be more or less the same. So you have the entry point would be a phishing, even if you forced it, instead of getting a vanilla Windows with a recently created account, which doesn't make sense. So at the end, we want something as similar as possible as a customer laptop or standard setup. So we try to use a used laptop. The first step is to phish ourselves, and then we start from there the engagement. And we find it pretty useful to do it like that. It saves time. It saves some money to the customer, and it's the most similar we found to make it similar to a phishing attack.
That makes a lot of sense, and I really like the approach that you mentioned, where the red team shows themselves or does some activities a little noisier. I mean, certainly a red team engagement is supposed to be as quiet as possible, stealthy as possible, take time, be multi-months engagement in many cases. But being able to show some activity and see what happens, certainly that should be something that could be that the customer should identify. But certainly the red team can also talk about as part of what they're doing. We've all heard about the situations where a red team or a pen test gets, domain admins in 5 minutes and gets, compromises Active Directory, or jumps in at that point, or has or as opposed to the longer approach where there's, a lot of time that's taken and maybe they don't get in because they're coming from the outside in. What do you think is the best way that from two perspectives? One, from the services perspective, the company that's performing that pen test or red team, when they are able to get to domain admins in 5 minutes, what is a great way that they can provide value to that customer beyond the I won mentality? And then the second question is, how can the customer take that opportunity and that situation to really gain the best value and approach out of it? And then I have a final question that kind of adds on to that. So what are some of the best things that defenders can do to truly frustrate and block attackers?
Okay, so about the getting the domain admin in 5 minutes, we try to avoid customers with this maturity level. So at the end, we ask for some standards on the customer. So if the customer doesn't have a SOC or a really established security team, we're not providing those red teaming services, and we're offering penetration testing or vulnerability scanning or other kinds of tests that may help them to improve their maturity level. And once that's covered, when they are doing penetration testing, like every now and then, every quarter or every 6 months, and they are not getting many things from there, and they have some processes for detection and response, it's where we recommend to go for a red team engagement. So if the company is not ready, we're not doing those engagements, because it's frustrating for our consultants, and it's really frustrating for the customer, who feel that they are not doing a good job. And at the end, our goal is to help them improve, not frustrate them and tell them that they are doing things really bad. So that's what we try to help them, and with it like links with what I was saying before about the learning experience. So if there's nothing to learn on it, it's useless for us and useless for them. So yeah, that's something that we're normally not doing or not recommending. Then about the last question. So what's the best approach for the customer to detect and to block these attacks? At the end, I would assume that I'm going to be breached at some point. So you need to have the best processes to detect that. So you need to have a good telemetry, you need to have good controls, you need to have good alerts, and you need to test them from time to time. So those red team engagements at the end, they help you to test how your people and how your processes would be responding against a real attack. If they are doing that every day, or if they are doing that every year a couple of times, they are doing some red team engagements on different assets, and they know how to react when this happens in the reality. They will know what they have to do and how to do it, and they will be fast. If they are not doing this kind of engagement and this kind of tests, they will be really surprised, and they will just run and try to switch off everything. They want to solve the problem, and they will be very nervous and won't be able to react properly against the threat. So yeah, we recommend to have those processes well tested, and to have also the security tools that allow to have a really good telemetry on what's happening on your network. I don't know if there was another question or I answered everything.
Oh, no, you got them. Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Just pivoting a little bit here, I want to talk about trends in pen testing and red teaming. In general, Pablo, I don't recall your full history, but one of the stereotypes of pen testing is that it's, the pen tester wins every time, right? They or the red team gets in every time, and you make the point of, sure, there's a bunch of organizations, maybe that it's a checkbox, they have to have a pen test, but their maturity is just not where they should really be having a pen test. They're not going to get a whole lot of value out of the pen test. It's going to be really easy because they haven't taken care of all the low-hanging fruit, the basics and things like that. But in general, are you finding, you're getting good results from pen tests and red teams? People are reacting to it. It's getting more difficult for the red teamer or the pen tester, or is it still just as easy now as it was 10 or 20 years ago? It's just the TTPs that change. The tools you're using, the techniques you're using evolve over time.
So I would say that the average maturity level of places having pen tests performed has risen over the last several years. Also, EDRs are better and better, and each time more difficult to circumvent. But at the end, there's always a way. So if you're smart enough and if you spend enough time, you will find a way to go in. So it's true that if you see the latest techniques to be stealthier and to try to trick the EDRs are each time more complicated. So I don't know, probably some people in the audience saw the last blog post that the CoverStrike team released, and it's a really nice new technique to do some stack trace spoofing, and thread stack spoofing. Sorry, and they are doing these kind of things already. So they are changing like all the behaviors of the implants and of the tools that they are using just to be more evasive against EDRs, and that's because those tools and those the companies owning them are getting more and more mature, and it's more difficult to go in and to stay undetected. So yeah, there are still some businesses that are not learning or that are not doing anything, but the regulations at the end they make some of these tests mandatory, and that's pushing the companies to increase their maturity level. So penetration tests, if they let them, if they let you do them properly, they get a lot of insight, because they will give you a lot of possible attack paths, because there are some. So there will always be a way to access, or there will always be a machine that has been forgotten and hasn't been updated. Now, for example, with Core Impact, we're about to release a module or a series of modules to hack and to do pen testing on IBM systems. Those like small mainframes from IBM that are still having or inside the core banking systems and are there in the companies and are sometimes forgotten. And the data that is here is critical to the companies. So there's always legacy machines that can be broken, and that do not have those EDRs and those modern agents installed, where a lot of information is stored. So you will always get value from doing penetration tests. I think if it's done well and by the correct people, and same with red teaming. So even if the evasion or if the EDRs and the antiviruses are better and better, the hackers are also evolving, and the new techniques are really advanced. And the truth is that it's much easier to do a POC of an offensive technique than to have an EDR or a rule detecting those techniques, because it's that one goes inside a product that should be stable, that should be secure. So at the end, the EDRs and the antiviruses are always behind the techniques of the attackers. So there's always place to learn and to improve and to have a good experience on a red team engagement.
I really like that answer, because you talk about the nuance of how things have gotten better, but also how there's additional challenges in newer research. And that mirrors what I've seen with security assessments at Trimark. When looking at these environments, when looking at Active Directory, sure, the security of the environment has gotten better, but then there's more research around Active Directory certificate services, for example. And then all of a sudden, there's a whole lot of other opportunities for the attackers to compromise AD because of that. You mentioned IPMI. There's been a lot of research and issues around that, especially with HP ILO and the work that Airbus Security did, and HP iDRAC and others, and certainly with the Eclipsium release about firmware and IPMI systems and the system on the chip that leverages all of that. There's a lot of opportunity there as well. The attackers will go where the opportunities are, and I think that mirrors very well with what pen testers and red teamers are doing. We're seeing that with VMware now with ransomware. How do you feel, or how do you see that the current scourge of ransomware has really defined or potentially redefined how pen testing and red teaming approaches an engagement, or has it at all?
I think it's there. So it's a big worry of the companies to be hit by a ransomware. So they are trying to protect themselves, but at the end, the techniques are the same. But instead of deploying a malware that provides access to a different place of the company, or that lets you steal data or destroy data, an implant with a different behavior. So at the end, besides the techniques to detect that there's an encryption ongoing, it's basically the same. So at the end, a ransomware gang, what they need is to breach the company from the outside through a phish or through a vulnerability like what happened with the VMware vulnerability. And they have to get in. And once they get in, they move laterally and they try to encrypt the critical assets of the company to try to get the ransom. So it's true that when especially when we're doing red teaming or when there's a red team engagement, there are some customers who ask you to mimic a specific ransomware attack. So it's they what they say to our consultants. It's basically, hey, I'm scared of that one, or there's a big hype on this ransomware and how this APT is acting. We want to be able to react against an attack like this. So there are some ransomware gangs that what they are doing is to throw a massive attack, and they want to reach the target as fast as possible. So I was reading the other day about a ransomware that was encrypting the systems in less than 3 hours after the breach. So basically, they are doing they are using low hanging fruit and they're going in as fast as possible and encrypting as fast as they can. And that's something that could be simulated. In some cases, when we do that, the customers tell us, "Hey, but I catch you really fast, and it's okay. You asked me to try this kind of test, so you're probably ready to fight against those type of ransomwares." There are other attacks or other ransomware gangs that what they do is like more targeted attacks, and they are stealthier. They perform long-running attacks to reach a more specific goal without being catched, and that's something that could be also simulated. And we'll use like another APT persona for the tester. So they will behave as another different profile, and the tester should be able to adapt to what the customer needs on terms of testing what they need. So yeah, I think that the approach at the end it's like really basic what all these attacks are doing. So it's breaching, going in, setting persistence with an implant or whatever, and then they can choose if they stay there to steal as much data as they can, or if they try to destroy the environment as fast as they can to encrypt the systems and ask for ransom.
Yeah, one of the things I think that's interesting there is, just an observation I've made over time. Like 10, 11 years ago, people were giving talks about how pen testing, and red teaming didn't really simulate adversaries because it was hard to. A lot of people were getting popped by exploit kits. Browsers weren't all that secure back then, so you could just browse to a website, and people were just getting popped with malware all day long. And the malware would be unique, so antivirus wouldn't catch it. And it's just tough to get a company to allow you to just start infecting machines with malware back in those days like that. But what you say is interesting. Like what these ransomware crews are doing is really basic. Yeah, every time I look at a detailed post-mortem of a ransomware attack, I'm looking at all these steps. And I'm like, this is just a very basic pen test. What's going on here? So it's almost, I think in our, an advantage today, because when you get a pen test, I think or a red team assessment, it very closely mirrors what the attackers are doing today. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, actually, it's especially with the red teaming. I think that pen testing, as it goes more for coverage, at the end you want to detect as many vulnerabilities as you can and as fast as you can to avoid having low hanging fruit on your environment. But with red teaming, yeah, it's like you say. So when we have the the offer for red teaming. I was the other day I was like talking with one of our consultants, one of the leads of the consulting in the Outflank team, and he made a really great example. So when they are talking to the customer, they are showing themselves as the characters or of a video game. So it's like you have different points for each one of the strengths of the character. So for example, you have like speed, stealthiness, I don't know, fast moving, whatever. So depending on the attack that you want to emulate or simulate, you're choosing one of these characters that maps or kind of maps the APT that you're trying to mimic. So in our case, we think that there are like two approaches. So to try to mimic the techniques that or the way of acting of a gang, of an APT, or you can run the same attack that was performed. So for example, if you want to mimic a specific attack that was described with all the actions one by one that were taking to breach a company. So if you do that, you're like simulating malware or an issue or breach that already happened. So the next one won't be the same. So if you do that, if you really mimic a previous attack, you'll be like 6 months old on your engagement, because it's something that already happened, and the attackers learned from that. They won't do the same thing again. So they will try something different. So at the end, the important thing is the behavior. So as a tester, to try to behave as if you were one of those gangs and think like they would think. So if there's like a gang where they do like massive attacks, so you need to act really fast. You need to attack as many targets as you can, as fast as you can, to try to find one gap to go in and do your bad stuff. If you want to mimic, I don't know, state nations, for example, they probably have a more specific target that and they will act differently. So they will probably try to access a single point. They will do much more research on the outside to find all the attack surface of the target. They will study much more what's going on there and where they can find the breach. And when they are pretty sure on where to attack, they will perform their attack, and they will go through it. But you need to adapt. I think that adaptability and knowing, really, I'm repeating myself a lot, but really knowing what the customer wants to learn through that engagement, I think it's like the basic point of having a successful engagement.
Well, you're repeating the important bits, though. So that's, I mean, that's what we want. Reiterate those points. Katie, I think you had a question.
Speaking of successful engagements, what are some of the things that companies can do when they hire you and your team that are some of the best things to throw your team off? What are the things that make it hard for your pen testers to do your job? In other words, them being uber prepared. So what are some of the tougher engagements you've had, and what did those companies do so that your teams actually came up against some good defenses?
Actually, I think that the most difficult companies to breach are the ones doing those exercises often. So when they are doing this kind of red team engagements or red teaming gigs, a lot of times they learn how the attackers are acting, and what are the controls that they have to set up in their systems to be able to detect those attacks. There are a lot of some companies that instead of having like controls to detect attackers, they have controls to detect red teamers. So instead of it's like what happens also with Cobalt Strike. So EDRs and antiviruses are in many cases building controls to detect specifically Cobalt Strike, But if you change it a bit, this control doesn't work anymore. So it's really difficult when the companies really have controls that are looking for the consequences of the attack, or for the result of what a red team or what an attacker would do, instead of the behavior of the action that is being taken. So, for example, there are pretty simple controls. For example, on the registry, that you can check some let's say some registers in the Windows registry. You can have a control to check that it hasn't been modified, and that's a pretty simple control that could really help you detect an enumeration process, for example. So every or most of the red teamers, attackers, anybody that is testing an environment, they will do a user enumeration. So if you put something as simple as you put a fake group in the Active Directory, and if somebody reads that entry, you know that somebody is enumerating your Active Directory. Is a really simple control that many people are not doing, and it's pretty useful to detect that somebody is looking for information there. So when the teams, when the companies have experience and they know what they're doing, and they test their environments constantly, or really many times, they learn a lot, and when they learn, it's much more difficult to find gaps on their security. At the end, normally there's something we can go through, or where the red teamers can use to go in. So there are always tools. There's always some misconfigurations. There's always something forgotten in some corner that you can leverage to access. I don't know of any empty report, basically, after a red team engagement or a penetration testing engagement. But it's true that in some companies it's really difficult to reach the goals.
I know we're short on time here, but I have one quick question before we have to wrap up here, and Adriana will take it over. But in terms of the red teaming as a service, or automated red teaming, there are some companies with these products or platforms. What do you think about those? Are they helping the industry? Are they hurting the industry? Do people think that they can replace you with that automated platformized red team test?
To me, it's abusing of the term, of the red teaming term. So if a red team is really the people performing it, it's really important. And that's why companies are rotating a lot of times their consultants, because they want different point of views, and they want different ways of doing the same thing. And that's why I think that the human part here is really important. And if you're trying to automate that, at the end it's not red teaming at all. It would be more similar to breach and attack simulation, I would say. So it's trying to mimic TTPs and execute one after the other in a specific order, following a workflow. And you will, same as with penetration testing, you will find gaps, or you will find misconfigurations, but it's much more difficult to decide. So at the end, a pen tester or a red teamer needs to take decisions during the test. If you try to automate all that, it will be much more noisy. It won't be similar to what an attacker does, and it will. To me, it's not useless. It's something that is it's pretty useful. I would say that is like a step before penetration testing. You can have vulnerability management. You can have breach and attack simulation tools, even if they are called automatic pen testing or even automatic red teaming tools. To me, that's before using operator-driven tools to perform the tests. They will provide results, but it's not the same thing. I think it doesn't avoid doing an actual pen test or an actual red team engagement.
So yeah, basically it sounds like you're saying you pull out the human ingenuity, the creativity, that goes into finding another way in when something fails. It can't really be red teaming.
Yeah, actually, you need the human intelligence to be able to pivot and to change your approach and to do something completely different to what you were testing or to what the previous tester did. To be able to, when you find a roadblock, you need to be creative, and those guys are pretty creative.
Exactly. I think I'm going to throw over to Sean for one last question before we wrap up here.
Thanks, Adrian. So, Pablo, one of the things that I continue to see popping up in threat and breach reports is the use of Cobalt Strike by attackers. Certainly, there's a bit of a Pandora's box situation here where there are Cobalt Strike versions already out there. But my question for you is, what are some of the things that Core Security is doing to mitigate the use and capability of this useful offensive tool, Cobalt Strike, by attackers?
So there were a lot of actions that were taken in the last couple of years to try to avoid that. So we made changes into the product to make tracking more difficult. So one of the things that we discovered is that before, I think it was 4.5, before the 4.5 version, a couple of weeks after it was released, there were cracked versions of the product all around. And since we released 4.6, there haven't been any cracked version. So what we're seeing in the wild are stolen versions. So there are some customers that are breached, and the hackers, they steal the full folder and they are using it. And we're inside of our company. We have a department that is working with the authorities, taking down those servers. And they are actively working on that, on taking down those servers. And we're also working in the Cobalt Strike product side to improve the security of it. So we're right now on the 4X versions, and we're working on 5 version. That would be a really big thing on the security level. So we're change how Cobalt Strike works, how Cobalt Strike is built, and how the licensing works, and we'll be making a lot of changes to improve even more that security level. So for now we're adding new features in the product to make it more difficult. We're also adding features in the product to be able to fingerprint rogue beacons or rogue team servers that are not used for good stuff. So we can link them to the original customer, and we collaborate with customers to help them to understand if they were breached and when and how. And we also collaborate with the authorities on the taking down of those servers. So as a company, as Fortra and as the Cobalt Strike team, it's a really important thing, that product security, and we're doing our best to avoid that. And actually, we're hearing from we had that happened in some customers, that they told us that they are using other products besides Cobalt Strike because it's they are the gangs and the bad guys. In the last times, they are seeing that Cobalt Strike is more difficult to crack, more difficult to bypass at the security level. So they are moving to other C2 frameworks that make it easier. So yeah, that's something that is happening, that we're working on it. Where at the end, our goal is to make companies more secure and not to make hackers more efficient. So yeah, we're fighting against that, and we're doing our best to reduce that usage of Cobalt Strike by the nefarious actors.
Yeah, thank you for that, Pablo. That's a great answer. I think it's an important question, and it's it sounds like just raising the bar enough, will push them to use other things, and I think that's really important. But yeah, thank you for the conversation today, Pablo. Excellent. I think some of the best answers I've heard to some of these common questions I think we've all had or discussed over time, especially your answer to automated red teaming. I loved your answer there. But yeah, Pablo, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
Yeah, thank you. It was great to be here again. So see you next time.
Yep. See you next time. And make sure you visit securityweekly.com/Fortra to learn more. There's a lot of great resources in the show notes from today that Core Security has. Some videos, some webinars, some guides, data sheets, good stuff there. Stick around. We'll be right back in a few moments chatting about human factors in cybersecurity with Dr. Inka Karppinen. Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Fortra helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automation. Take your engagements further by pairing with our red teaming tools from Cobalt Strike and Outflank. Learn more at www.securityweekly.com/core security. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their RSA Conference 2023 full conference pass. RSA Conference will take place April 24th through 27th in San Francisco and on demand. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC 2023 and use the code 53UCybers. That's 53, the letter U, Cyber. We hope to see you there. All right, for our final interview today, we have Dr. Inka Karppinen joining us today to talk some BS. BS being behavioral science in the context of today's conversation. We're going to talk about how behavioral science can help to positively influence people's cybersecurity behaviors. Inka is the lead behavioral scientist at CybSafe. She's a cyber psychologist and mixed methods human-computer interaction researcher. She loves narrowing the research gap between academia and practice, creating a meaningful, positive impact on people's cybersecurity behaviors. Welcome to the show, Inka.
Thank you, Adrian. And yes, I am full of BS.
It's great. Yeah, so starting out real quick, I'd love to hear a little bit about your background. Like, how does a behavioral scientist get into cybersecurity? Did you start off with it, or did you go a more traditional route, and then something made you pivot into this industry?
I think that's interesting. I've gone through a very interesting route. So I started actually just moving from Finland to London, and ended up working, then decided let's go for university, do something that I enjoyed doing, which was psychology. And I worked and studied my bachelor's and master's courses, or throughout them, in pension industry. I did some banking, insurance industry as well, events, all that stuff. And all the way through, I went through the kind of psychology aspect of it. So I really enjoyed that. And ended up doing evening courses on occupational psychology. So that's all about organizational culture, performance management, training, what makes people tick in organizations. And somehow I ended up going for a PhD, because when you hit kind of a little bit of trouble with like credit crunch, what's your solution? Just do more study. So I ended up doing a PhD at University College London in Security and Crime Science Department. It was a doctoral training center. And through there, loved behavioral economics, behavioral science, persuasive technology. And I think I was kind of a social engineer, because I sat in computer science department and I was a psychologist. So when people talked about things like latex, I had no idea what it was. I thought it was the plastic sheet or something like that. So yeah, psychology has been always the red thread, and I ended up being at CybSafe because they do behavioral security and try to protect people and help people. And that's another interesting or important point for my career, is always looking ways to help people and protect them.
Yeah, very, very mission focused. I find in CybSafe, like that particular part of the industry, you find a lot of mission focused folks. Yes,
we are definitely focused on the cybersecurity and data analytics and how to actually measure behavior and help the organization to secure themselves. So it's revolutionizing the way society addresses the human aspect of cybersecurity.
So when we were speaking to prepare for this interview, accidentally discovered that Lisa Plagemeyer, who we love and we had on episode 299. just a few months ago, and I understand that you collaborate with Lisa on an annual report.
Yes, so we've been running for 2 years now. This is our third year. Our CAB report, which is Cybersecurity Attitudes and Behaviors report, and we actually call this "Oh Behave" because it's a little bit of a "Oh Behave" style of movie quote, basically. And we collect data between US, UK, Canada at the moment, and we are hoping to expand to other markets as well within Europe and perhaps even Australia or New Zealand this year, and collect a large data set and see what people feel about cybersecurity, what their attitudes are, what they're doing, what they're not doing, what are the reasons why they don't do something, and what are the reasons why they do things. So we can then, direct the campaigns, or we can help to protect society in that way.
And it's I think you working at CybSafe, and I love that you could get a PhD, with a focus on security and crime science. Like that's
yes,
such a great opportunity, because oftentimes, we talk about lack of talent, or like we can't fill jobs and things like that. And every time I see someone like a behavioral scientist working for a security vendor or in a security role, it makes complete sense. So I sometimes wonder if at least part of our talent gap in the industry is due to a lack of imagination and creativity in hiring the right roles. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody with a background in security. We need people with backgrounds in all sorts of things to help us in the security industry.
Exactly, and it's all about human factors. So I often position myself as a user. So why don't I install this software updates? Why don't I apply multi-factor authentication? What is my barrier?
Right.
And it's sometimes when you're in technology, you kind of don't think of it as a user perspective very well, and you're just really focused on the tech bits of it, and you forget that we're all actually humans and treat them that way. So we create barriers most often than actually helpful solutions for people.
And just to understand your role a little bit more, is it mostly outward facing, supporting marketing, things like that, sharing your research, talking about your research, or are you also very involved on the product side, helping with product strategy, product development, product roadmap, that kind of thing?
Yes, so we have now a team of us. So we have another behavioral scientist and a user researcher, and then we have a director of science and research who is very well known academic in the industry, Dr. Jason Nurse. And we basically are focused on thought leadership as well as product. So it's been pretty much kind of fundamental research and applied research. So we are kind of doing the both worlds at the same time. My initial focus was on thought leadership projects. We did a project on quirks, which is basically was funded through the government agencies, through the risks network. And it looked at how can we increase human cyber resilience through personalization. So I was initially just doing thought leadership and then continued with the product-related research. And now we are part of the squads. So we work cross-departmental and cross squads and apply science there. So apply direct to the product.
Awesome. So yeah, you mentioned quirks. Let's just dive into some of your actual research. What's a quirk?
Quirk is a personalization factor. So what makes us individuals different? And that's what we really focused on. So the identifying personalization factors. So these can be our capability, opportunity, motivation theory. It's a behavior change wheel, basically, the inside of it. And then we have things like demographic factors. So we have age, personality, education levels. We have, I forgot most of them, but we got job roles, interests and preferences. So it really is a kind of, you can personalize and tailor cybersecurity training and awareness packages to actually address those. So one size doesn't fit all, basically. We are creating stuff that is tailored and fits for everybody, regardless of their background or their level of experience. And obviously, for those who are more experienced, we can tailor the content to be more interesting as well. And that's basically the project looked at those factors. And then we looked at the behavior change wheel, which in its heart, it's the COM-B model. And we applied behavior change techniques. And there are actually around 74 behavioral change techniques and around 24 modes of action. So that's like 93 techniques. And we focused on action planning, goal setting, behavioral practice, and risk messaging. So that was salience of consequences, basically how people feel about things when they're being, tailored by, you're over 55 years old, you might be at higher risk of style of scams and attacks than somebody who is younger age group. So those are the kind of stuff that we looked at. And then we designed an intervention that was digital and trying to change people's cybersecurity behaviors towards better behaviors and encourage them to take action. And the cybersecurity behaviors we looked at particularly were around passwords. So password creation, password management, as well as two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication.
So all these different quirks and methods and characterizations, I imagine that the behavior change wheel is like a framework for understanding and categorizing all these things that you're describing?
Yes. Okay. It's a theoretical framework, and it was developed initially to use of kind of public health sphere. It's UCL Professor Susan Mickey, who is the guru of the behavior change wheel, and it's widely used on things like health-related behaviors, drinking less, stopping smoking, things like that, and how can we make people taking healthier choices. So we are trying to apply this, and we have successfully applied it in cybersecurity as well.
So obviously with behavioral science, it's all about figuring out what works for different types of people and trying to tailor content and messaging to them, right? But what are some of the surprising findings that you've had maybe in your research, different types of tactics that have worked to facilitate, good change or eliminate bad habits that you didn't expect before you did the research?
So I would say always kind of talking about why is the most important thing. Like it is like I see security as you have an elephant, you have a rider, and you have a path. And this is quite an interesting analogy. And the rider is somebody like the CISO, the security professional. The elephant is actually the workforce, the employees working for that organization. And then you've got the path, which is about the tasks and things that organization is trying to achieve and do every day. And it is like, you have to influence the elephant. So you have to get elephant moving. Otherwise, the rider can do everything. He can beat up, he can punish, he can try to encourage. But you know what? Elephant, it will move when it wants to move. It will, see an obstacle on the way of its path, it will stop doing it, or it changes the route. So we're kind of unpredictable, despite our best efforts to direct behavior towards security behavior, good security behaviors. It is really hard to do. So in a way, the motivation and the why is super important. So that's actually, I didn't realize before before joining in cybersecurity company that how that is actually the spice and key to everything. It is really, why should we take action? Why should we take action to protect ourselves? And when you explain that alone can influence the motivation, as long as you've got obviously opportunity to do it. So if the organization doesn't give the right tools to individual, just says go and apply multi-factor authentication or use a password manager, but then don't have it freely available or don't give the information how to do this, then even if they were motivated to do it, they won't do it. So it's kind of a balance of why and how. And yes, the capability is basically the training and awareness that alone necessarily doesn't lead to anywhere. So we need more of the opportunity and motivation aspect. So yeah, I guess that was the surprising aspect for me.
And over the years, I mean, I've heard about people trying to incorporate psychology into things like phishing testing and awareness programs. Yes. What do you think, other than the providing the why? What are some of the other things that really work? Because from where I sit, I don't think that awareness and education is the problem anymore. I mean, yes, to a certain degree, of course it is, but I think it's habits. And it's also that in the workplace, even though we say, don't click on links, don't open attachments, that's not really doable because as part of our daily tasks, we have to do some of this. And there are technical controls that help to a degree, and there are things you can do to watch out for obvious maliciousness, but you can't really train that out of people to say, I'm never clicking a link, because then employees would never get their work done. So how have things changed? How has this whole field, the scientific field, changed the game to influence behavior? Like you said, leading the elephant down the path, or even just letting the elephant find the best path.
Yes, so particularly in phishing, I find it really, the old theories are used by the cyber criminals. So basically, those influencing techniques by Robert Cialdini, the scarcity, the authority, liking, commitment, consistency, reciprocation. If criminals are using this is what makes people tick. Why are we not using them in cybersecurity training? And actually, in CybSafe, we use these techniques as well to do our simulation emails. So simulation phishing emails. And we can get data to see what people are particularly vulnerable within that organization. So we can even look at our own organization, what we're vulnerable to, which is quite funny. And it just really depends on the moment. Like, the criminal just has to get you at the right moment. We're all susceptible to phishing. Like, whether you are IT security expert or whether you are just novice person, you know what, it just needs the right time and, the right circumstances for you to click on that link or provide even further information. So there are a lot of examples of this in research. A lot of the scams are now focused on things like button pressing or when people are job seeking, when they're most vulnerable, through LinkedIn, kind of apply here, provide a little bit of information on forms, and then all of a sudden you're actually given addresses, you're given personal details. So it's basically, they got everything, and then they just need that one thing to go further, and influencing techniques does that as well. So because of this commitment and consistency, so if we give a little, then we are more likely to give more. So because we already committed to taking that action. So definitely those old theories are influencing and used by the criminals, and we should be using them against them, really.
Do as the attackers do.
I think that brings up...
and they work 24/7. So we should work 24/7 and be protected. So have the updates installed, have the good passwords, strong and unique passwords, add on the 2FA, because they will never stop. We work 9 to 5, but you know what? Criminals work 24/7. So with hybrid environments as well, you bring your computer home, everybody got access to it, whoever is in your house, or you can lose it on the bus or train. It's not anymore kind of physical security is not protecting you in an organization. It really is kind of, we are everywhere now. We are online constantly, 24/7 as well.
So particularly with phishing testing, but not necessarily limited to that, I imagine that there is some danger there, and you have to find a line and find some kind of balance in discovering what people would do, what they're susceptible to, but there's a certain line that attackers will certainly cross, right after an earthquake or something like that. They'll pretend to have some results of people recovered from, like they'll absolutely cross that line, where it's not okay for your security department to cross. A particular example I remember is the Chicago Tribune. I think canceled everyone's holiday bonuses, and then the security team sent out a phishing test that said, "Oh, no, actually, you are going to get your bonuses," and they had some success with that, and people were very upset when they found out, that was a phishing test. So how do you find that line and find that balance between what it's okay for an organization to do and to test their employees versus, obviously there's things the attackers will do that is just a line that we can't cross.
It comes to the ethics question, and as well as being ethical, we should always have empathy as well. So we shouldn't be, as cybersecurity professionals, sending simulations that are kind of almost playing on people's situations that are real and happening there, like those bonuses. It raises emotion, which also cyber criminals do. But in this case, simulations, we're not there to catch them. The point of simulation is not to go like, I got you, and now you're going to be doing more training, or, you get punished, or you're part of the stats that, our phishing simulations are failing and you need more training. It shouldn't be used that way. Phishing should be more positively framed as this is an educational factor, and these are the signs that you might look for, and they should be quite obvious, actually, because criminals are not, at the moment, they can't be bothered to do, all those clever phishing techniques to everyday people. They are using the same templates, the rich prince contacting you, they got inheritance, or the army soldier coming to ask you money. All those are super, easy to spot, but people still fail for them. And those are the occasions we should be focusing on, rather than the aspect of how can we get our employees to fail. That's wrong messaging. It should be more about how can we help people to protect themselves, and what is the minimum they need to know to have the maximum protection.
And kind of as a follow-up to that question, as someone who clearly has experience with multiple cultures, multiple countries, languages, do you have to build your content for a particular country or culture? Like, I imagine, what's effective in the UK is maybe not as effective in the US, and maybe that's not as diverse an example as I could have grabbed. But certainly, let's take the Middle East. Maybe what's effective in the Middle East is completely different from what's effective, in the US or the UK. Do you have to take all that into account when working with this and building this?
In a way, it depends on this. The thing about with psychological, like influencing techniques, for example, for phishing, they are the weapons of influence. And I think no matter what country you're from, you are going to fall for one of those. It's a no-brainer. We're all humans, But when you design for training or you design for behavioral change, then you have to take into account the cultural aspects. And there are quite a few books on that topic as well. So when you deliver something for Eastern cultures compared to Western cultures is a little bit different. We haven't gone to that stage yet, but we are keen to look at those individual differences as well.
And getting into some of those differences, what are some of the surprising? I remember. So, as an industry analyst, let me set up this question. Sorry, I used to field a lot of surveys, and I remember reading a book called Biology, B-U-I-ology, and I forget the name of the author, Martin Lindstrom, and he was somewhat famously like one of the first ad guy or marketing guy that use some neurological techniques, look at brain patterns and things like that to understand what people are thinking when they're taking surveys, when they're looking at advertisements and things like that, to understand the brain a little bit better. And I took away some interesting learnings from that book, but one that really stuck with me is that the way people complete surveys tends to be the way that they think you want them to answer, not what they actually feel. And I think you had some interesting results from something like this.
So yes, that's called the social desirability. And it's very common on, for example, personality tests. Nobody's going to admit that they, not a very nice person. So, but if you ask the questions the right way, you might actually get to the core. So, for example, in cybersecurity, instead of asking, do you do this? Ask like, do you know any colleagues who are doing this? So are your colleagues, not reporting cybersecurity incidents or, overall? So they're not reporting them then about them. They are reporting the perception of the actual department or the organization. And that could give you a better picture, because nobody wants to admit that they are the ones who are like brushing things under the carpet, or if there is a security error or mistake, they just don't report it. So definitely there is that social desirability bias in surveys and questionnaires. How we can combat that? It's another question through objective data, most likely. So we can triangulate more of the self-reports with what's going behind the platform, which we also do at CybSafe. So we do metrics on, when people are clicking links, when they are creating passwords, things like that. Are they strong? Are they, and we send them the nudges as well, saying like, actually, your password is not as good as it should be. So perhaps you might consider changing that. So it has to be the opinion and objective data. Plus, you could also look at archival data, things like what are the accidents that have happened previously or the incidents in the organization, and really look at the overall picture to pinpoint where the problems are.
Yeah, predicting the future with because humans aren't going to change, right? So, if you see something, a behavior was common in the past, you can be pretty much guaranteed it's going to continue on into the future, right?
So yeah, it's part of the shadow security research that has been done on this. So we create shortcuts. Our focus is always on productivity, basically. So it's a shame that our job descriptions are not saying, you're going to do XY job, whether it's from finance to a receptionist, but you're going to do it securely. And these are the points that you have to do to be secure. So that could include cybersecurity, and often that's not explained to people. So yes, I do believe that cybersecurity could have a better reputation if we would actually include it within the main tasks. So the productivity would actually, we could create time to do cybersecurity training that would not disrupt the productivity too much. Because we always go the shortcut. We are humans. We take the shortcut, unless it's has clear consequences to us. And in cybersecurity, often those are not clear. So if nothing happens, it's actually pretty good. Nobody's saying, oh, we're doing so well on cybersecurity, nothing has happened. But then something happens, and then we are just almost on the blame culture again. It's us and them, blaming the human and not the actual whole organization, the whole system where we got there. And we should encourage the positive culture of cybersecurity more.
I've personally experienced this both directly with processes that I have written and also as a consultant in other organizations. Something I learned the hard way. You write a process. Here's the correct way that this should be done. And then you actually go out and you look at how people are doing it, and they've completely ignored your instructions in the process, and they found a different way to do it. Because, of course, when I came up with that, I'm not the subject matter expert. I don't work in their job. I had no place writing up that process for something I didn't understand, and I didn't do any testing of it. So of course, human, like you're saying, are going to find the shortcut. They're going to do it completely differently. And, if I had known that starting out and anticipated that, maybe it would have created a process that actually, matched what was being done in the environment.
Exactly. And it is often, sometimes it's, I did my PhD on physical security side. So I was part of a case study organization, and they focused on money deliveries, and they had a lot of money, and operator had to drive from A to B securely. And what happens when you have 20, 30 jobs on the day, there is traffic on a road, you get to your destination, but then already you're late for the next one, you're late for the next one after that. And out go the security policies, the way you operate safely. So it was one of them was even as simple as wearing a helmet. People were asked, why didn't you wear a helmet? And they go, actually, it's scratched because I didn't have a time to place it securely, and it was rolling around my van when I was driving. And now the visors are scratched and bumpy, and I can't see anything out of it. So I just rather go without the helmet. And obviously, if they go out without the helmet, they can get attacked, as well as carrying money procedures. They had certain procedures when they deliver, and those were skipped. And it was all because the main measurement for their job was, have you done your day's job, instead of have you done it securely. So there was a lot of the security culture issues there, and they had very, very many security rules and procedures that were created after the incident happened first time. So it's a bit like the James Reason's human error and the Swiss cheese, basically the framework. So you create more and more barriers to stop productivity.
Yeah, Swiss cheese framework I love. Especially when talking about defense in depth, I think it's a useful model to use. But yeah, the specific from my question earlier, the specific example I loved when we're talking about surveys and people, if you ask them directly, they'll answer differently. Was you ask them if they would share their password? I think you said almost everybody says no, of course not. I'd never do that. And then when they're actually tested, I think you said 73% shared their password, which is like the complete opposite result.
It is interesting, that one. And then actually on that tab survey, the old behavior report that we do with National Cybersecurity Alliance, the last one said that 64% don't create unique and separate passwords, and they admitted to that. And you go like, why would they? They're hard to remember. They have no strategies to manage the passwords. They don't know, what a password manager is or how to use it. So I think on that report, it was 18% who said that they use standalone password manager. And that's really low numbers, So 40% said they just write it down on a notebook, which is kind of great if your notebook is secure, and it depends who you are. But it's our own practices are so different from what's the recommendations are. But then if we asked, we might lie sneakily. But these people actually said our main preferred method is notebook, and we don't really use any strong passwords or anything else.
Wow. Yeah, I think Katie had a question.
I do. You're talking about the culture of security in an organization, and I think that's fantastic. We do have to build a culture of security. What happens at an organization if executives or line of business managers disagree about the role that security plays in the organization and how it affects their individual teams? It's one thing to think about IT and security and other technology groups, and another to think about sales, who some line of business managers might think their only job is revenue. So what do you do when there's that conflict?
Oh, that's a kind of really bad culture. So I think if you look at the maturity model there at the beginning of the just tick the compliance box, do once a year training, and that's it. Apparently they're protected. If there is anything happening, you always blame the IT. So it's that kind of classic us and them setup. But as said, like, then they might have a bad culture of how do you deal with breaches or if somebody makes a mistake. So is the cybersecurity reporting culture then any good? I doubt, because usually then those, organizations, they are not aware that some things have happened. People have clicked the links because it can be 3 months down the line before the criminals, make the attack. So you don't actually know who clicked and what. And then you find that person and you end up sacking them. So it's like that sends absolutely a wrong message. So often you find that if that's the security culture, then you have quite a big problems in your organizations in general with the culture as well. It might not be very supportive for the employees, and it might be not open for communication. People are afraid to report incidents. They are afraid to, do more than the mandatory training. They're afraid to say, like, actually, I don't understand this, and just somehow do the, end of the training questions and say that, oh, we changed our behavior, although they did not. So yes, there is, I would say, those organizations, please get in touch.
Good advice.
So you have, you've got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of interesting reports. I think one of the things I found most interesting that I wasn't aware of before was SebDB. I love that you've built a database of behaviors, and it's not just a database of behaviors. Everything's categorized. You've got different tiers. Tell us a little bit about SebDB.
So SebDB is Security Behaviors Database. It is the most comprehensive security behavior database in the world at the moment. So nobody else has beaten us to it. And it includes, at the moment, over 70 behaviors. And we are working on the next version that should be coming out very, very soon. So hopefully this spring. And it offers insight of, okay, what are the security behaviors that we can actually target to minimize the human cyber risk and help the organizations. So, for example, it's got account security behaviors. It's got stuff like installing updates, phishing. So it categorizes them by tiers as well. So tiering is 1 to 4, and tier 1 is, definitely the crucial ones. And then whittling down. But all our platform, the product itself, is running with the SebDB behaviors. So we can actually calculate the risk. We can see how much it gets reduced if people take action on certain parts of the security goals. So we can then give data to organizations as well. And as said, we are adding on behaviors there, so it's absolutely not complete yet. And it's a living database, and we are inviting people to collaborate, especially if there are any academics or any other industry people. We have a community group on this, so please do sign up, get in touch with us on that if you wish to take part for the next version, which will be running.
And then I believe it's the cybersecurity quirks stuff that we were talking about, that research we were talking about earlier that you're presenting at the Impact Conference, correct?
Yes, so the Impact Conference is next month. I presented this to the Home Office and NCSC, which is the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre. And there was also Cyber Resilience Network, Protect officers and police people. So it was a very good reception. We have a policy document coming out of that, which is going to be live as well for people to access. And I will be presenting a short presentation, so not a full 45 minutes like I did for the actual stakeholders, but this will be around 20-minute presentation on 2nd of March. And it will be available online afterwards. So if you're interested, please have a look at the CybSafe website for that. And at the same time, we are running the conference US times. in the afternoon. So we start UK time at 2, which is Eastern time, 9 a.m. And it will be hybrid, so in person and virtual. And there will be virtual networking groups as well there. So please do come join us. We have interesting speakers, including Lisa from NCA and Julie from NIST. I forgot Julie's surname, so my apologies. But she'll be there as well.
Julie Haney.
Yes. So I'm happy to present with such a high-powered woman or speaker list.
Yeah, no, that it looks like a really cool conference, and a nice change from the typical. I don't know. A lot of the conferences that I've gone to, there's a lot of technical stuff, or it's the same management level talks. So this is. I definitely want to learn more about this. And I'm glad to hear that it's hybrid as well. So you don't have to be in the UK. Yes. You don't have to be in London to participate.
Yes, it's only for the morning sessions that are not streamed live, but they will be available afterwards. So yes, you can watch them at your own leisure if you like the Quirks project, for example. Or we have at the beginning we had a new speaker there who had some really good research. I think his name was Joseph, but let me correct that one. On the
Joseph Da Silva.
On the yes.
Yep. Good stuff. All right, Inka, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. This was a fun chat.
Thank you. Oh, it was fun too. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And we've got all kinds of resources in the show notes, links to the different annual reports, links to the conference, links to white papers, to the SebDB that we mentioned. All those links are there. You can go to securityweekly.com/ESW306 to take a look at those links. And yeah, thanks again, Inka, for joining us. Thanks also to Katie and Sean for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Next week is a holiday week, so we'll be running an encore presentation of our interview with Marty Resch from episode 293. We'll be back live March 2nd. See you then.